The big story in the country is about how Lloyd Austin, who was Secretary of Defense, was MIA, missing in action for 5 days. We learned later he checked himself into Walter Reed Army Hospital. He had prostate cancer operation. I've had that. Worst mistake you could ever do. Don't get your prostate taken out. There are so many other remedies. Trust me, out of the many mistakes I've made in my life, the worst mistake to have my prostate removed. And just think, we broadcast in the studios of Bernard McGurk, who we miss dearly. He would have been alive today if he just simply got a PSA test, a blood test, a prick of the finger. Nothing to be afraid of. And then could have pursued a number of remedies that are available now that were not available when I was diagnosed with stage 4 prostate cancer, and I opted to have my prostate taken out by robotic surgery. What a mistake. So I have no idea what they did to Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin and Walter Reed Army Hospital, but I think we all recognize that he failed in his fiduciary responsibility to alert everybody. It's not like all of a sudden he just collapsed and hadn't had to be wheeled into the ICU or ER, or even then somebody should have alerted. But no, there was plenty of time. He just chose not to for whatever reason. And that cannot be forgiven. Apparently, Joe Biden only found out yesterday. But then again, he might have been told and he would have forgotten on previous days. But anyway, it's a hot mess. But you know what this does? This reminds me of a previous time. But so many of you glorify Ed Koch. I don't. Ed Koch was one of the worst mayors of the city of New York. Oh, no, he's one of the best. Wrong. Let me tell you what happened with Ed Koch. Very simply. He appointed the first black police commissioner, who was Benjamin Ward. Let me tell you a little bit about Benjamin Ward, because he wasn't born with a silver spoon in his mouth. It's not like, there was nepotism involved. He had gone to automotive high school right there in Greenpoint, near McCarran Park. He went on to college, and Mayor John Lindsay, a failed mayor, designated Benjamin Ward as the traffic commissioner in 73, and he created the Brownies. It was actually good because uniformed traffic controllers, a.k.a. Brownies, took to the streets, and it freed hundreds of cops to go out there and do what cops do. But then he was designated to run the Department of Corrections first for Ed Koch when he first got elected. And then by 1984, he became the police commissioner. Let me tell you about Benjamin Ward and his failure. One of the most serious missing in action cases of a major American figure in the history of policing, in the history of government. It does not equal the disappearance of Lloyd Austin, Secretary of Defense. But it was super serious, and he should have been sacked. And Ed Koch didn't. Let me take you back. It was a rainy Palm Sunday night in 1984. I'll never forget it. 10 women and children were gunned down execution style at the house, located in Brooklyn, 75th Precinct, East New York, the most active. It was a drug-related massacre that still stands as the largest mass murder in the city's history. The guy who eventually got caught for it, Christopher Thomas. Now, we talk about people being released now, right? Recently, a guy who had killed a cop when he stopped a fare evasion in Columbus Circle. They released this cop killer who has gone out and committed 4 more crimes. And people are rightfully outraged. You know, Justin Ellick, that Christopher Thomas was eventually released. It wasn't triple life without parole. He was released from jail after executing 10 women and children in East New York on Palm Sunday. At a press conference the following day, Commissioner Ben Ward was nowhere to be seen, nowhere to be found. The highest ranking official in the NYPD was incommunicado. No cell phones at that time. But people were saying, hey, where's the police commissioner? Koch wouldn't say anything. The other police brass wouldn't say anything. It turns out, Justin, he was on a bender, a drinking bender with a floozy, a hooker who was his mistress in the Beltway in the Washington, Maryland, Virginia area. And that fact was covered up by Mayor Ed Koch and everyone else at the highest echelon of the police department. It was only revealed a year later by newspaper reporter for Newsday, Leonard Levitt. And then they couldn't deny it any longer. And when Ed Koch was confronted with that fact that this guy had been out there hanging out with a floozy, missing in action for days and days and days. Again, the worst serial killing that has ever occurred in New York City. 10 women and children shot in the head, dead. Christopher Thomas, sentenced. Out there in the street somewhere. Could be your neighbor. That's a triple outrage, right? And you know what Ed Koch said a year later? When he had covered this up, he said, Benjamin Ward is the greatest police commissioner ever in the history of the police department dating back to Teddy Roosevelt, who formed this. But that's not the worst thing about Benjamin Ward. I would be remiss if I didn't point out that in 1972, and I passed the mosque from time to time on 102nd and East 116th Street in Harlem, the location of the old mosque. No longer there. Patrolman Philip Cardillo and Vito Navarra responded to a 1013. That was a Nation of Islam mosque where Malcolm X used to preach. Upon arriving inside, they were ambushed by 15 to 20 men, one of whom, according to the ballistics report, shot Cardillo at point-blank range. Most of the police were forced out of the mosque and locked out, leaving a dying Cardillo and officers Victor Padilla and Ivan Negron locked inside. Police eventually managed to break down the door and witnessed a man named Louis, 17X Dupree, standing over Cardillo with a gun in hand. But before Dupree could be taken into custody, Screwy Louis Farrakhan and Charles Rangel arrived at the scene, threatening a riot if Dupree was not released. Just as the police forensics unit was about to seal off the crime scene, they were ordered out of the mosque by the police brass. Outside, a mob had overrun the street and overturned a police cruiser. Benjamin Ward released the 16 suspects. He had been sent down there by Mayor John Jelly Belly Lindsay, an action for which he was later criticized by a grand jury. He also apologized in front of everybody to Screwy Louis Farrakhan for violating an agreement that the police would not enter the mosque. Justin Ellick, he was the first major police official to take a knee. He took a knee in front of Screwy Louis Farrakhan. And some of you out there, oh, Ed Koch, great mayor. No way. No way. When this guy was missing in action, the worst killing ever in the city of New York, he covered it up. And then when it was exposed, he said, no, Benjamin Ward stays my police commissioner. He's the greatest police commissioner of all time since Teddy Roosevelt invented formal policing in the city of New York. What a double shanda. What a double disgraziata. And how many of you gave him a pass for that, huh? So when I hear Secretary of Defense Austin missing in action for 5 days, you know what my knee-jerk reaction is? That was Benjamin Ward. And a year later, when it was exposed, you know what he said he was? An asthmatic. He was having asthma problems, and he had to go to an ICU and an ER. Lies. Lies, lies. And so many of you out there listening gave both of them a pass.